Okay, doing a live uh, reaction to this. Granted, this is going to be audio only. People kind of want to know what my 2 cents was going to be in regards to this. Hang on. Am I actually live? Oh, I'm live. Okay. There we go. Still getting adjusted to the way this works, folks, but people have been sort of asking what my general thoughts are on this. What do I think of the idea of the overall impression? Well, I'll get to some basics. I like the fact that they're kind of having some scenes from Man of Steel connect up in this with Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne seeing a tower that he. If you'll pardon me a second. That's a little something else there, folks. Sorry about that. I like the fact that there are scenes from Man of Steel that are interconnected with this, and you get to see the understanding of why Bruce Wayne has an axe to grind with Superman in this. And it's still playing off the realism themes from the last movie. You know, how would this world react to a being that had that kind of power and those capabilities? A man who has the strength of 10 or 100 men, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, faster, more powerful than a locomotive, which is tame by today's standards, and a man who can fly, shoot lasers out of his eyes. I mean, to an army soldier, you know, to an army general, that's the perfect soldier. But it's easy to sort of understand and take on board why the authority figures in this movie have an issue with it. I mean, yeah, Superman is representing us. He's representing the good guys, but the flip side to this is, what if that power, you know, was used for the wrong purposes? What if he decides to go rogue, like it's shown in the movie Crisis on Two Earths? You know, what if we did have a world where Superman decides to be more Vegeta than Goku? And yes, I am well aware that they're doing a rematch of said confrontation, which I'm sure will be awesome again. But again, you know, you put in a realistic setting for Superman, which I'm going to be honest, is, you know, there's some clever ideas in regards to that. And I've read in some comments online that some people are saying that Ben Affleck is already, quote, the worst Batman ever. They should register my disgust on the internet. Okay, I got a couple of problems with that set statement already. To said people who are making that declaration, have you actually seen said movie yet? Have you actually had the privilege of watching this monumental classic masterpiece that none of us have seen yet? None of us have seen this movie. And yet, in your infinite wisdom, I have seen Ben Affleck in Cape and Co, and his acting is worse than that of George Clooney. And I'm sure a comic book guy is annoyed that I'm ripping him off. And I'm sure L-Man of Raw Down Rebound fame is just looking at it and goes like, why are you doing this? You are stealing my gimmick. There's a little bit of Paul Heyman in there. Oh, good Lord, can you imagine Brock Lesnar as Superman? No. Getting off on a tangent. I'm going to go through some more pieces that I like from what I've seen from this trailer, particularly in regards to the look that Affleck has as Bruce Wayne and Batman. For one thing, I like that they're having an adaptation that is somewhat based upon Dark Knight Returns, with Batman coming out of retirement after so many years. He's having to retrain and get his body back in shape for it, find that spark and that reason to be the Dark Knight again. But what I like that they've done in regards to Affleck's look, he's a veteran, seasoned Caped Crusader, but he still looks as though he's young enough to actually give Superman a run for his money, even though Batman is a mere mortal compared to the superpowered being from the stars, which is Superman. I mean, considering Affleck's 41, 42, I'm sure someone will correct me, whoever is watching this. It looks like he can still go from the general look that Affleck is given, because Bruce Wayne in Dark Knight Returns is about 55, 56. He's not young, but he's not necessarily old in some respects. He's just at that point where, okay, he's not as agile as he may have once been, but he's savvy enough to use what works for him and just to get the best of things in regards to the opponents he goes up against. So in terms of visuals, I don't really have a problem with this. I like the fact that based upon the trailer alone, they've actually put color back into Superman's costume, because if you recall from the way the color setup was for Man of Steel, that they drained all of the brightness and all of the all the color out of it. It looked very drab, gray. But I know that they were trying to go for a gritty realism in regards to the feel of the story, but I don't think in terms of visuals they had to take that particular route as well. Not everything has to be the Chris Nolan approach where everything has to be uber serious and brooding protagonists. It doesn't need to do that way. I mean, with Batman being that way, it makes sense for that character. But it's just the way that everyone has pretty much copy, paste, and done the same set template. You don't need to do that for someone, say, like Superman or Spider-Man. And of course, we've had Kryptonite brought back in, which we haven't seen since Superman Returns in 2006, which for me, that movie at best was a guilty pleasure. Wasn't going to be as good as Superman 1, and personally I think Superman 2 was just that little bit better. But it tried to take what those first two movies had done and actually build upon that, and just it tried to be its own thing, tried to stand on its own merits. And to be fair, it took a reasonable amount of money at the box office, made back its budget, but I just don't think people were wowed in the same way when the first two movies came out. But I have to keep in perspective that there's more or less a 30-year distance between the original Superman movie in 1978 and then the sort of retcon modern feel that the 2006 movie had. I still think Brandon Routh was a very good Clark Kent, because at times you had to actually look twice and think, is that Brandon or is that Christopher Reeve? Because the makeup and wardrobe department did a really phenomenal job of really staying true to where that particular movie storyline had come from. We had Kryptonite in the first Superman movie. We didn't see it for Superman 2. Superman 3, it turned into red Kryptonite because of Richard Pryor's prior characters adding tar to it, which was kind of random. Superman 4, we don't see it at all, which I think some of us were actually quite relieved by. Then, like I say, it shows up again in Superman Returns. Man of Steel doesn't show up, and here we have Kryptonite showing up once again. Now, I appreciate there are some fine some fine details that they have to keep in the scope of things, because that is synonymous with Superman just as much as his blue suit with the red cape, but losing the red tights, the red shorts over the blue tights. I didn't really have a problem with that per se. I just looked and thought, okay, no big thing. But considering the amount of times that Batman Batman has gotten really, really uber popular within the last 10 to 15 years. The thing that I find with Batman is, although stories are very compelling, he has the best rogues gallery in the history of comic books, with Spider-Man coming a close second. The thing I find most annoying in regards to The Dark Knight is they have to keep hammering through his origin story. Now, at the time when the first Tim Burton Batman came out in 1989, what I like that they did about that movie is it wasn't an origin story, but they put in flashbacks to his parents being murdered in the alleyway by a much younger Joker, which I found out years later that was just Tim Burton trying to set up some kind of connection as to why Batman would have that kind of a grudge against the Joker, and finding out it was him that killed his parents. Whereas we all know from the way that Chris Nolan and David Goyer did Batman Begins, it was Joe Chill who killed his parents. And yet I find that they're doing this again in Batman v Superman. Granted, it's just a flashback this time, but it gets to the point where you feel like they're kind of insulting our intelligence a little bit, because The Dark Knight Rises is only 3 years removed since its original release in 2012. And when you think about it, that's not really that much of a huge difference in the scheme of things. I could understand if Batman had not been on the big screen for, say, 20 to 30 years, then yeah, you might want to re-educate the audience, or tell the new audience where this guy comes from, why his purpose is in this way, and why he goes about his business in this particular manner. But considering the likes of the first Batman and Batman Begins are modern day classics, you look at the way that the first Batman was filmed. When I say the first Batman, I'm still referring to the Burton movie. You look at that movie today, the way it was done, it has aged surprisingly well. Decent set, decent cast of actors, really decent special effects. I don't think there were too many visual effects, although I'm sure there's somebody in my forum that will correct me on that. And getting Michael Keaton as the lead protagonist, you had the ingredients for a decent movie. And I think if this movie was re-released today, I think it wouldn't just survive at the box office. It would thrive. It would actually stand up to maybe not so much Jurassic World, but I think it could go up against Age of Ultron or the first Spider-Man movie, and it would do well. It wouldn't, like I say, it wouldn't just survive, it would thrive. And like I say, there's been, and even in the animated series, from things like Batman, the animated series, to the Batman, we're given reminders. The Batman had maybe like 2 or 3 episodes, and even in some of the animated movies, things like Dark Knight Returns Part 1 or The Batman vs. Dracula, which, by the way, if you ever happen to see The Batman vs. Dracula on DVD, whether it's on HMV, whether it's on Amazon, or even if it's at Best Buy. You see that going for something like £4, £5, or if you're in the States and it's going for like $4 to $5. The concept in itself is a little bit silly, but trust me, you're going to get your money's worth and then some, because, you know, what's possibly the biggest villain that Batman has ever faced? You know, it's the Dark Knight versus the Dark Prince. And even, I'm giving away a couple of spoilers here, so, you know, if you haven't seen the movie, you know, you haven't read the synopsis, then, you know, mute your speakers. I'll give you 10 seconds to do it, because in that, there's a scene where there's a slight moment of hypnotism, and Batman just recalls why he became Batman and goes to defeat Dracula. And it's like I say, it gets to the point where it's like, you know what, we know that this guy's motivation for being the Batman is to prevent from what happened to him to be prevented from happening to somebody else. You know, if I'm going to bring up a comparison, albeit this is not the best comparison to bring into it, and I'm sure most WWE fans can relate to this, it's some 2 to 3 years ago when the WWE app became a thing, and you'd get the ever so wonderful Michael Cole would actually show you on camera how to actually download the WWE app, whereas anybody who is tech savvy, or even just reasonably savvy with smartphones and anything else with computers, it's pretty much self-explanatory with the instructions on these app stores. They tell you how to do it anyway. So, and then constantly reminding people a couple of years later how simple it is to get the WWE network on tablets, smartphones, computers, or through, you know, your gaming consoles, and it's $9.99 each week. You know, it's insulting to the audience's intelligence. You know, we know how this works. We don't need to be reminded on a consistent basis. And, you know, it's kind of the same, and it's like the same thing with Batman's origin. It's like, yeah, we know his parents were murdered right in front of him, and that is his motivation for him to putting on the cape and cowl. Now, I know there's going to be a few out there that are going to be like, well, if you're that against it in regards to his origin story, then you shouldn't really say anything about what happened in the pilot episode of Gotham. You are right in some aspects, but considering it was starting at a point where Bruce Wayne was still a child, that kind of thing was unavoidable. But with Batman v Superman, this is I don't want to say a veteran Bruce Wayne. This is a distinguished Bruce Wayne. He's seasoned, but there's still some youthfulness about him, and the man could still go. And I don't think we need being reminded of that. Oh, another thing, Zack Snyder, don't do a J.J. Abrams and put lens flare. Because when you see, just towards the end of the trailer, you see Superman lift off 2 pieces off the new Batmobile, which is badass, by the way. And you see Batman stand up as if to say, okay, we're going to go, son. You see a lens flare come out of one of the headlights. I'm just looking at that thinking, you know, do we really need to do that? Do we really need another lens flare incident? Or, as Razorfist would say, lens flare everywhere! My brother does it better, and he can attest to that. But I like the fact that Margot Kidder is in this as well. I actually had a little bit of a hard time actually noticing that it was actually her, you know? but then again, I recognize her from when she was in all four movies. I know she done a couple of guest appearances on Smallville, but to see everything come back full circle to where she's the senator in this. Although the interesting thing, I go looking on the Wikipedia page and she's not actually there, but according to Random, that was actually her making that address. She's aged very well and looking very healthy too, I might add. The overall feel is the sense of there is a kind of anarchy in regards to the whole setup. I'm not entirely sold on Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. I've never seen the guy out before, but I've heard very, very good things from when he was in The Social Network, which had another actor that would go on to being a superhero, Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, which I will still attest to this day that he is still a better Spider-Man than Tobey Maguire. Tobey Maguire is the better Peter Parker, but Andrew is simply the better Spider-Man. I mean, Tobey cracks what? One joke or two a movie, whereas with Andrew Garfield, you have to tell him, like, dude, you can it for a while, So, the only thing that's really sort of say with Eisenberg's Luthor is when he goes into this little chant or little eccentricity of the red capes are coming, the red capes are coming. I was reminded of Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. The guy would, his version of Luthor is very devious, very cold, underhanded, but there's something quite charming and charismatic about that particular portrayal. You felt even though you know that the guy is a complete heel, there's something quite likable about him. Or another example is, I know we're going back into wrestling a second. Vince McMahon is one of the most vilified heels in the history of WWE and sports entertainment, but you just can't hate him because the guy has something so charismatic about himself. And who knows? Jesse Eisenberg might just win an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor or Best Villain if they ever do decide to introduce an award into the Academy Awards. I highly doubt it, but I don't know. It's looking promising, but I don't really want to give an opinion on the whole shebang until I actually see, like the final credit roll in March of 2016 when this movie is set to come out, because I think originally it was supposed to actually come out this year in July, but I think they kind of got ahead of themselves, and yeah. And with the announcement also of Ben Affleck wanting to co-write and direct a standalone Batman movie, considering that this guy did some amazing work with Fargo and The Town, which are very highly acclaimed pieces of work from this man who hasn't really had the best career as an actor, Daredevil notwithstanding, but he's actually gone on to direct two really grade A movies. I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be allowed to have an attempt at doing another Batman movie, because from one standpoint, it'll be nice to see a fresh take on how this character should be done, because everyone seems to have this mindset that because of what Chris Nolan did 10 years ago this summer, when the Dark Knight trilogy first started, is that is the template to do. That was his vision. And to be fair to him, he actually made Batman so credible again, because it had been 8 years by that point since the woeful ratings wise and woeful financially performing Batman and Robin, they waited for the right time to bring it back, and he was the right guy for the job at the time. It's just that everyone else seems to think, oh, we need to make all movies dark and gritty realism. I don't think that's the way to go for every single movie and superhero property, because when you see movies like Kung Fury show up on the internet, that is a sign and an indication from the movie audience that we're kind of tired of gritty realism when what we want is escapism. Now, I know there are some things that have to be done in a somewhat realistic fashion because the audience can then get into it, but via the same token, it gets old where your main protagonist is just cut and copy paste from what Christopher Nolan has set up. I don't know what kind of mindset that Affleck has in mind for when he does his standalone Batman movie. And we kind of figured that there would be another Batman movie. For one thing, in regards to that and possible sequels, it'd actually be nice if we actually got a movie instead of seeing something like The Dark Knight Rises as a sequel to The Dark Knight. Why don't we actually reintroduce numbers to a sequel? You know, I actually like the days where you go to watch a sequel and let's just say, for the sake of argument, let's just say Universal decided to have another attempt at doing a live action Thunderbird movie series, but do it with the people that are with ITV Studios and Pukeko Pictures, because let's face it, they had more of a clue than the crew that did it 11 years ago. And we see Thunderbirds the movie, or Thunderbirds the movie 2, Thunderbirds the movie 3, not have, say, Thunderbirds The Hood Awakens, or Thunderbirds The Revenge of a Tyrant. You know, it comes across as a little bit pretentious when we see things like that. So when we eventually get to a Man of Steel sequel, I don't want to see Man of Steel, The Man of Tomorrow. I don't want to see Man of Steel, Last Son of Krypton. I want to see Man of Steel 2. Keep it simple, because, like I say, it comes across as being pretentious a little bit, and we just want to see a superhero movie with the good guys saving the day, you know? One of the things that not too many people have touched upon is Gal Gadot's look as Wonder Woman. I love it. I wasn't expecting her to pull off that look. And the only thing, and this is just a constructive, critical piece, I will say, although she appears to be athletically toned a little bit from what I could see, and the fact that she's using her bracelets as a means of distorting energy from what I saw in that trailer. The only thing I think that they could have done with her is just make her put on a tiny bit of muscle. Not to say that she couldn't do it with what she had, it just looks more plausible to the eye if she actually did that, because I think they did that in the direct-to-DVD movie that had Kerry Russell as the voice of Wonder Woman. And if you haven't seen that movie, give it a look. It's one of those movies that it really does spend a bit of time actually getting the audience to care about the character, you know, the way that she wants to have faith in mankind after having her people separated from the outside world for so long. But the flip side to that is she's a little bit apprehensive. She's not 100% convinced at the same time, which Kerry, to her credit, she really, like I say, puts the kind of emotional depth, a little bit of naivete, and at the same time being very forthright as Diana Prince on Wonder Woman. Which, of course, we know that this movie will lead into a Justice League live-action movie, which, I'm going to be honest, I don't know if it's a case of Warner Brothers have left it little too late, or the fact that they're just rushing this. I think they should have been laying the groundwork for this since they started Batman Begins. But via the same token, I don't think they knew just exactly what Marvel were going to do when they formed their own movie studio, got the cinematic universe off the ground with the first Iron Man movie, because what people need to remember is they laid everything on the line with that movie because they weren't 100% sure if it would work. They were taking a gamble on Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. And to be fair, Robert Downey Jr. was playing a big gamble on this because he needed a major movie to get himself back into the limelight after all the personal struggles he had, which I'm not going to go into because that's not the time and place to do this here. That movie comes out and everyone's blown away. Iron Man was not really one of the most profiled comic book heroes from Marvel at that particular point in time. But that movie not only got audiences to care about Iron Man, but it reestablished Robert Downey Jr. as a competent actor, and it's actually one of his best characters, because the line between actor and character is extremely blurred, because it's a natural fit for him to be in that role, because Robert, from what I've seen, very outspoken, very charismatic, and the same can be said for Tony Stark. And I like the fact that in a lot of videos that have shown up online, from his official Facebook page as well, is what he did for that kid that had only a partially formed right arm, and he shows up as Tony Stark in character, in suit, with an Iron Man limb from Iron Man 3 and a prosthetic 3D printed limb for the kid to have, just so that the kid could have a normal life. Now, when actors are actually using their superhero roles to actually make a difference in someone's life, then it's just exactly that. You're making a difference in someone else's life. And I think, like I say, if DC had laid the groundwork then who's to say in 2012 we couldn't have had Avengers going at it in April and then have a Justice League movie in July? Let's just say, for all intents and purposes. But, no one really saw that coming, and DC are like, they've managed to get the first ever superhero team-up movie happen. And they've been playing catch-up ever since. Now, some people are going to have their opinions about Marvel, and that's fine. But Marvel did it the right way. They actually took their time each year with these standalone movies acting as prequels to the first Avengers movie, where you actually got to know the characters, establish them, so that by the time the first Avengers movie got here, you knew who these characters were. You got comfortable with them. The problem with DC, and I'm being constructive with this, they're trying to rush this. I mean, to be fair, with Man of Steel, we needed a fresh take on Superman, because I think while Bryan Singer's vision of taking what had been established with the Dick Donner movies was good, it's not really resonating to the audience of today. And people can say what they will about Man of Steel. I enjoyed it for what it was. I think Henry Cavill played a very realistic, but at the same time, very faithful rendition of how Clark Kent would be, but still recognizing the character for who he is. I mean, he tried to deal with things from a point of isolation as Clark Kent. The only thing I felt that could have been done with that movie is Supes could have shown up a little bit earlier to go start doing the job that he needed to do. But that's another story. I think if we had had, let's say for argument's sake, a Wonder Woman movie the year after that, and then maybe a year later with Tyrese Gibson as Green Lantern, which I would love to see him in that role, because this guy is going on full campaign mode to actually get that role, and I don't see any reason why he shouldn't, because he's a fantastic actor. And then probably end it with a standalone Batman movie where Batman's looking at the end of it thinking, you totaled one of my buildings and you caused a few casualties that day. Yeah, I'm just gonna go to the Batcave and get the cape and cowl, and we're gonna go duke it out. But that's just it. I think realistically, if DC wanted to not necessarily copy and paste move for move what Marvel have done with their cinematic universe, I think they should have taken lessons and actually take time to establish these characters, get to care about them. So realistically, we should be getting a Justice League movie by 2018, 2019, just so that all these other characters can be built from the ground up, just so that we know who they are, and by the time we get to said Justice League movie, we're all ready for it, but DC are rushing it. So I don't know. Well, those have been my thoughts and opinions for Batman v Superman. Contrary to what some of you may be thinking, I'm actually looking so forward to this movie for next year, because Superman was one of the first comic book superheroes I saw on screen. I say on screen, but it was on TV at the time, because by the time I saw the first Superman movie in the 80s, it had been nearly 10 years since Christopher Reeve first took to the screen as the Man of Tomorrow or the Man of Steel. And, you know, I could sort of resonate with Superman, that particular one, because he's the ultimate good guy and nice guy. He just wants to see things, you know, all peaceful, all pleasant. Batman has a similar mentality, but Batman will do questionable things that everyone else will look and think, I wouldn't do that if I were you. But, you know, Batman, in terms of the character that he is, he's one that operates at night, because, you know, a vigilante that's wearing a black cape and cowl will work best from the shadows, whereas, you know, out in the daylight, he'll stick out like a sore thumb, whereas Superman operates day and night. So it'll be good to see those two finally on the big screen. Technically, we have seen this done before. If you saw the Superman the Animated Series, I think it was the season 3 opener, which Warner Brothers then compiled into a TV movie, which then got put out as a DVD, and it pretty much doesn't tell the exact same story, but I'm getting the impression that it does end with a resolution with the two of them finally teaming up. But I'm just looking forward to seeing what I can expect from this next year, because we've waited far too long to see this movie done. It would have been cool to see if we could have had a Michael Keaton, Christopher Reeve, Superman, Batman movie. That certainly would have been good. Same thing with Brandon Routh and Christian Bale as Batman and Superman, respectively, or even Christian Bale and Henry Cavill as their respective characters. But Ben Affleck coming in as Bats, that'll be intriguing to see. Well, those have been my 2 cents on the whole matter. I do apologize if this has been lengthy. Next time, I'll probably get a couple more people to come in and have a Google Hangout just so we can have a bit more interaction. But yeah, next year, two icons finally go at it. See you next time. Thank you.